All right, man. So the Parkland shooting, I held off talking about it for a minute until I thought about it, and I almost didn't talk about it, but it just touches on too many things. We saw a few very familiar patterns, and we had some old pieces of information reinforced for us. How to do this? So the first pattern we saw reinforced again is that a young man from I don't want to say a broken home, but from an unconventional home on psychotropic drugs and under psychiatric care and in government-run schools is a recipe for disaster. And now think about all those things again. Young man from an let's say an unconventional home under psychiatric care on these drugs. Also, no male in the house. Recipe for disaster, and all of his anger and angst came out against that government-run matriarchal school, as we've seen happen so many times in the past. We've seen this almost this exact same template in Sandy Hook, Columbine. Most of those elements were there. The Charleston shooter, a lot of these elements were there. That stupid kid who went nuts out in California a few years ago, and he didn't get that many. I think he got like 3 people, or he attacked 6 people or something. All these elements are there. Unconventional homes, no male role model, psychiatric care. I mean, it's time after time after time after time after time we see these things and these tragedies. But for some reason it's the gun that gets called out each time. Forget everything else. All the other things that are the same. It's the gun that is the culprit in these shootings. So, what's that tell us? Obviously, our society's sick and our society's dying, and there's no way around it. These things are endemic to us now. When I was young, when I was a kid, I was talking about this the other day with a couple people. Now, this was before I was in high school, but you used to take your guns to school with you sometimes in the morning. You'd see guys walking into school in the morning with their hunting rifles, and they'd put them in their school locker. And the school preferred that because they didn't want them in the windows of the pickup trucks and the gun racks. Okay, there was, students walking in the front door with high-powered rifles, and there were no mass school shootings. All right, all these mass school shootings have been started since the gun-free school zones and all this stuff. I think Columbine was in '99. I think the gun-free school zone started, with Clinton '94 or something. I don't remember. So it's not the guns. We had access to fully automatic military weapons all the way up until the mid-20s, and there weren't school shootings. There was one school bombing that had more to do with it was the treasurer of a private school who blew up the school. The school was failing. He might have been embezzling money. They're not sure. There was more there going on than just the problem. This stuff has come up since the late '90s. It's a symbol of what's going on in our society, and our society is sick and dying, and our society will still be sick and dying if you outlaw the guns. It's just the government then will get to do it quicker, because as soon as they get the guns, they're coming for the kids to put all the kids in their government-run schools and underneath their psychiatric care. Mariah was telling me something today about a child that was a teenager that was taken out of its home because the child's parents didn't want to let it, go down this transgendered road, and so the government stepped in and jerked that child out and said, "Oh no, you obviously your parents don't know what's best for you." Don't get me started on that. Okay, so we saw that about society and who these shooters are. They're not people with access to guns. They're people from broken homes, unconventional homes, under psychiatric care, young men without fathers. That's who they are. All right. What else did we see? The government cannot. I might break this out into a whole different video. The police can't protect you. It's not the police's job to protect you. The police's job is to enforce laws. Laws aren't necessarily for your benefit. There's all sorts of reasons why there might be laws that are actually harmful to you, but police still have to enforce them. They're called law enforcement. They're not there for your protection. They can't protect you. They proved that. There was 3 or 4 of them on scene, and they were not able to protect those children. Not saying they're bad cops, not saying they're bad people. That's, first off, it's not their job. I hate to say that. It seems counterintuitive, but it's not law enforcement's job to protect you. The second thing is they can't protect you. They simply can't. We can't hire enough cops. We can't outsource violence enough to keep it away from us, especially not in a failing society. It can't happen. Law enforcement was in contact with this kid 39 times. He called 911. The shooter at one point called 911 and tried to explain to them that he was going nuts and he was probably going to do something crazy. He literally called the cops on himself. All right? The FBI was reported to the FBI. The school knew. Everybody knew. I mean, this was a massive failure. Not a failure. I'm sorry, no, it's not a failure because it's not their job. But it demonstrates graphically that they can't, it's not possible for them to do it. They can't protect you. I mean, they had every warning. People saw something and said something, and still they were not able to get in the way of this thing. When the society's sick, when the society's dying, when young men see no path forward other than to just wreak mayhem and devastation, there's no system you can put in place. You know, there's no guard against that. There's too many of these angry young men, these broken, hurt young men who our society has broken and hurt. All right? You know, this young man's responsible for his own actions, but there were a lot of people that fed into this over the years. A lot of people that fed into this. What else? I had a third thing, and I probably just touched on it already. Look, gun ownership isn't about safety. It's not about defending yourself or your children. The Second Amendment in gun ownership is about a counterweight to the government, and a counterweight to tyranny, and a counterweight from a system that's going to take your children and force them into these schools and force them into interaction with the government and health care that leads to these kind of results, all right? Every step of, oh, that's what it was. I'm sorry. Government caused this. You know, there's conspiracy theories out there about this was a false flag and you know, multiple shooters, and whether or not any of those conspiracy theories have any credence to them, this kid, every step of the way, came through government institutions. You know, from the school, the healthcare is federalized now. He passed through all the law enforcement. All, you know, the cops were coming out trying to be parents because, you know, his father was dead. But, you know, the men around him couldn't just crack him upside the head when he started shooting their dog with a BB gun. Think of it. This kid was shooting, you know, neighbor dogs with a BB gun. In any kind of sane world, the father of the house where that dog came from would have walked across the street, taken that BB gun away from that kid and busted it over his head. All right? It's in our world maybe that sounds brutal, but in a sane world, what's better? Busting a BB gun over a kid's butt? I'm sorry, I should have said butt, not head. Or grabbing him by his ear and dragging him over to his house so that some man at his house can bust it over his butt. That would happen in a sane world. But in this insane world where the government, you know, everyone's so scared of the government they can't discipline their kids, they got to call the cops. So the cops can come and take care of something that some adult man in the neighborhood should have walked over. You know what? That woman was a widow doing the best she could. This kid's mother, who's dead now, she was a widow. She tried to adopt these boys and be a good mom. Everything you hear about him is that she was a doting mom and had a great relationship with it. In a sane world, the families around this poor, you know, widowed woman would have been over there helping her. They would have kicked this kid's ass. Hey, stop being stupid. Your mom's doing the best she can. Hey, boom, don't be an idiot. You don't threaten my kid? Bam, you know. We think one man could have solved this if men were allowed in our culture to function as men. You know, I don't always buy into these conspiracy theories and false flag things, you know, about, you know, government shooter, this, that, second shooter, you know. But the government did cause this because the government has instituted a system that nurtures young men like this and brings them up to be this and twists them and molds them and forces them into this shape and to be this angry and this confused and this upset. It's maybe there wasn't some, you know, evil fat arch villain somewhere who was, masterminding this specific plot. But the big, soulless, faceless, moralless, that's not a right word, amoral, immoral system we've set up that is completely divorced from any kind of oversight or accountability or intrinsic morality, made this system where everyone can tick boxes and say, oh, I'm a nice person, oh, I'm a good person, oh, I have a secure job, oh, my little power has been satisfied for the day. You can't, and they take these children and they run them through this. I think about I don't know. You'll see it in cartoons sometimes or movies where there's some kind of weird, futuristic industrial process assembly line where there's all these machines pounding this and pounding that, and buzzsaws this, and the heroes like on this conveyor belt ducking all this stuff, or there's the girl tied up on the conveyor belt and all these bang 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 fire. That's what this system is that we've allowed to coalesce around us. It's this assembly line, this postmodern, futuristic, amoral, bizarro, dystopian assembly line that is molding and pressing and pounding and melting and smelting and casting these young men into this mold. And it's going to keep happening. And if you take away the guns, they'll start doing it with trucks or cars or improvised bombs, and then the government is going to have free reign to give us more of the same. Because they're same solutions. I have a very well-meaning family member. She's a teacher. She had this meme on Facebook right after this happened. You want to arm me? If you want to arm me with... And she talked about like school psychologists and school nurses and smaller class sizes. And she lists all this litany of left-wing educator wish list thing. All the stuff we've been working towards and giving them more and more of for years and years and years and years and years, and things get worse and worse and worse and worse. And I'm thinking, these are the things that caused this problem. It was psychologists and not school nurses, but this whole nanny system of enforced education, and this, putting these young men under these women and ripping out their masculinity because it's toxic, and beating them down and that's what's caused this, not the guns. We could buy every 16-year-old boy in America an AR-15, and we could easily, with just a little bit of work on the part of men like you and me, we could make those 16-year-old boys with those AR-15s be completely safe and functional. We could let them walk around all day long, every day, with loaded AR-15s and not have the mayhem we've had that's been caused by psychologists and government education and a matriarchal system twisting young men and trying to force them to be good little boys. I'm sure this has gone long. I'm getting spun up. I'm sorry we had to do this once again. The problem wasn't the gun, all right? The gun didn't kill 17 people. The liberal death cult killed 17 kids in that school. And you know what? There was some brave men in that school. One was a veteran, and the other it was a security guard. Had been a security guard. They were both coaches now, I think, or teachers. These men, unarmed, charged that kid and died. Imagine what would have happened if they'd have been armed. If they had the guts to charge him unarmed, how many lives would have been saved if just one of them had been allowed to have a 25 Raven in his pocket? Completely different story. We might not be hearing about this at all. Anyway, there we go. The liberal death cult strikes again. It wasn't the gun. It was the ideology. Liberalism is the ideology of death. Do not ever forget that. Thank you, men. We appreciate you.